So I guess we can just skip over our introduction.
Yeah, we kind of did that.
We had practiced it a little bit, but I think we're covered. So let's just go to the next slide.
The whole 29-year thing kind of gets me. Would you like me to turn this down or walk up here? Turn it down just a little bit. All right, I think I'm number 2. Oh, I'm number 1. Oh, I am. Yeah, I'm always better. Number 2.
He's number 2.
No pun there. Good?
Okay, so we want to give you a nice overview about what we plan to do for the next hour, as that's a really important piece for our 6 elements for creating culture of gentleness, is for us to know what comes next. What's the structure? What can you expect? So we're going to review culture care obstacles. What makes it difficult in our workplace for us to provide good care? And today we're going to be focusing more on with our coworkers and a little bit less about what we do for the folks we support. Because in order for us to have some fantastic services for the people we support, we need to be able to get along and have some healthy relationships with the individuals that we work closely with 40 plus hours a week. We're also going to be talking about emotion regulation and the importance of being able to control my own responses to stressful events. Because if I can't control my own responses, there's no way I'm going to be able to positively impact the culture at my workplace. I'm probably going to do a lot more damage if I'm running around being really angry with fire on my head. Last little bit is some tips and tricks that we have tried and that we're hoping to become better at in our own workplace that we hope you'll find fun and entertaining. Right?
Right.
So current obstacles, what gets in the way of having a positive workplace culture? This is Jenn going to work in the morning. I'm wanting to help the people. I've got a great attitude. I've had some pretty good sleep. Here I go, right? By 9 o'clock, I sometimes look like this. And it's like, what happens to me? What happens to that part that really wanted to help the people and be a great coworker? I start to have a lot of resentment. I get bitterness. I get emotional. I get impatient. All of these things happen that are human responses to stress. So let's take a look at why do we look like the Jurassic Park dinosaur when we so badly want to look like the Toy Story one, right? We've got this 10-to-1 ratio issue. And if you've taken a Working with People or a 3-day Culture of Gentleness conference, you've probably learned a little bit about what demands can do to your brain, right? We have to have at least 10 positive interactions for every 1 demand that our body absorbs. So let's just define what is a positive interaction and what's a demand. Positive interactions are the things that I enjoy, the things that I don't find to be work. They're the stuff that like builds me up and refreshes my battery and just makes me feel happy. I enjoy those positive interactions. The demands are going to be the to-do list, the tasks, the things that aren't as fun for me, but I know that they need to get done. And so at work, when those demands start to rise, something very special happens in our brain. And we go from operating with our prefrontal cortex, which just sits right behind your forehead. This is where the executive functioning is. This is where I can have a good social filter. It's where I can prioritize and organize what should come out of my mouth and what shouldn't come out of my mouth. This is where I know where my resources are. Like, this is like the sweet spot. This is where my A game comes from. It sits right here. But when my demands start to rise, something happens and the amygdala hijacks it. And the amygdala is just this little almond piece of our brain that sits behind our nose. And it's so powerful, but yet so small. And it just fight or flight. So demands are getting high and my brain is like, I got to help Jenn out. She's got to get out of this situation. It's too much. And that's where the Jurassic Park dinosaur comes from. Because amygdala doesn't care about relationships. Amygdala doesn't care about doing the right thing or being kind in a stressful moment. The amygdala just wants to get you out of that stress. And that's what happens to the folks we're supporting too. When their demands are going high, they're wanting to get out of that moment. And the only way we think we can get out of that moment is to fight or flight out of it. So we have to practice more positive interactions. And one of the best ways to do that is to have a great work culture. If our work culture is positive, it's going to help us buffer all those demands that happen in our jobs. So this is like what can happen when you come to work. You start with like, you're already behind, right? When you walk in the door, there is so much paperwork to provide good care to people. It's just, oh, what a fantastic world it would be if we didn't have to have paperwork and I can just spend all day with people. That would be great. We also have person-centered planning, and we have to constantly evaluate medical necessity. And not only do we evaluate medical necessity, but then our evaluation gets kicked over to utilization management, and then they're going to evaluate to make sure we evaluate it appropriately, because we don't want to overservice or underservice the folks we're supporting. Then we also can have a bunch of emails, we can have deadlines, we can have voicemails, we can have text messages, we have authorizations to do, we have an unscheduled crisis at the most inopportune time. So, and this all can happen before 9 o'clock in the morning. And so we really can understand what happens to our brain where that executive functioning takes a hit and the amygdala is like, let me help you out. And so this is why workplace culture is so hard to maintain and sustain, because of the demands that are placed on us all the time, from the time we go to work and even after work hours. It's just always coming at us. Doug's in the training department, so some of his demands are a little different.
I think, even though we're all come to these, this conference and we're all here to learn and grow, we come from different positions and different jobs and different job duties. And so we could make a list of all kinds of demands. My demands, although some might be similar, are different than Jenn's. Dee said I'm in the training department, and technically now I am the training department, which that's a demand for me, because that means I got to cover everything. And we have a training, out of 30 days of the month, we have a training 29. So when do I schedule a week's vacation? I got a class. So I'm going to take vacation and come in and train this class. That's a demand. No shows is a demand. I may have a class and have 20 participants signed up or something, and I'll have, 6 or 8 people not even show up. So I'm like, where are they at? Did they go to the wrong building? Are they doing this? So I'm making phone calls in the morning to try to figure out. I'm calling home managers. Well, I don't know how they're supposed to. Just all this stuff. And then there's all the little things like sign-in sheets and certificates and just goofy little things. It's like
cell phones.
Oh,
training.
Cell phones.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, what is it with our addiction and our culture with cell phones? And I know I got mine somewhere. Oh, it's over there. Yeah, I know. We just want to be. There's so much available to us that we just want to be a part of it all. So we don't want to miss nothing. I know. I'm distracted. I don't like to miss anything either.
Yeah, it's funny when we do the working with people, we usually do a little disclaimer just to remind people that it's a working with people training, not a working with cell phones training, and that we just want them to try and put those cell phones away. It's really an interesting culture.
What do you do in a class when you're trying to present some information that people are going to know, and they have a quiz, so you got to cover this, and they're asleep with their mouth wide open and drool coming down their cheek. What do you do? Last week, I had a class, and a wonderful lady came in and laid down on the floor. Well, I've never taught a class with a lady laying down on the floor by her table. I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with that. You want a mat? I got some first aid mats right over here. You want to lay in? It's just different. So it's just demands. It just creates things that come at us that we're not planned for. That's not in the script today. What do I do to be flexible and still get all these things, done? And you guys have the same things. You could give me a list of yours, and they would probably be different than mine.
Another obstacle we have in the workplace is misconceptions or judgments that aren't fully accurate. We have to be really careful when we're judging each other's work performance, because our truth isn't necessarily the whole truth. So at Health West, we have a lot of different divisions, right? We have a finance department that handles our payee ships, and we have the front desk who's handling a lot of walk-ins and a lot of people who have urgent needs. And then we have our team, and we're out in the community most of the time. We're not in the office hardly ever, which is why our desks look like all that paper, because we can't ever do it. And when I'm not available, when the finance people have a question, because I'm out maybe at a hospital or maybe I'm at a home visit, that holds them up and that can make them frustrated, right? And so you see how culture can take a hit When people can't get their demands met because they're trying to get things done and I'm not available to answer the question, or maybe I'm trying to get things done and they're not available to answer the question. And with humans, if this happens maybe 2 or 3 times, I'm going to start to judge that worker as like a sandbagger. I'm going to start to judge that worker as just, they're not quality, man. They make my job so much harder. But we have to remember that we're all a bunch of little icebergs bopping around in our agency. And what you see is only about 10% of what that person really does in their role. And so it's not fair of me to judge the finance department for not getting back to me quickly enough, because they've got other things too that I don't fully understand. And the same goes for them. There's a lot of things that I do that they might not understand. So if we can all just keep this misconception, just hold it off a little bit and be open to the idea that my truth, my experience isn't the whole truth, this could help save our culture from taking a big hit and some animosity developing or some bitterness starting to creep into those work cultures.
So this is a little metaphor. It's a story, and I'm going to do my best to read these to you from the slides. There's some awkward words in there. I'm going to tell you right up front, there's some goofy words that are kind of hard for me to say, so don't be judging me too hard on this, all right? So this story, or this metaphor, is about six men from Indostan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against the broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, "God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall." The second, feeling of the tusk, cried, "Oh, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me it's mighty clear. The wonder of an elephant is mighty like a spear." The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a snake." The fourth reached out an eager hand and fell about the knee. "What most this wondrous beast is mighty plain," quoth he, "this clear enough the elephant is very like a tree." The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, "E'en the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can, the marvel of an elephant is very like a fan." The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, "I see," quoth he, "the elephant is very like a rope." And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong. Though each was partly in the right, all were in the wrong. So this little metaphor, it just kind of illustrates how we can experience something, and that can become our whole experience, and we think that's the whole truth about the situation. And sometimes our perspectives, we base big decisions on, big judgments, and we really don't know the whole story sometimes. We don't know every battle in everybody's life. We don't know what everybody's going through. Some people don't know our battles. Sometimes they don't know what's the entire thing. They might know a certain point. And so we build our big perceptions, our big perspectives based on such a small amount of actual knowledge. And what we have might be true. I mean, he touched the ear. It was like a fan. But does that mean the elephant is a fan? No, it really doesn't. And so we need to understand that our perspectives doesn't mean that it's the broad truth for everybody.
When we used a book, Creating Excellence in the Workplace, to help us with this presentation. And when they went over this story, it was really funny because they were talking about coworkers, and you say hi to them in the hallway, and maybe they don't even respond to you. They don't even acknowledge you said hi. And he said, one of the things I do for myself when that happens to me is I wonder, what part of the elephant are they touching? They might not be in the greatest space right now. There might be things happening for them, their truth, is just really a terrible place. And that's why they aren't available maybe to say the hi. So if we could think that way about someone who doesn't respond to us favorably, rather than, oh, what a jerk, our culture is going to look a lot different. And that's just one little thing that I could do, is just the way I think about someone's response.
So don't raise your hands, but like, has anybody in here ever passed a coworker or somebody on your team or a supervisor in the building, or, you know, somebody that you know, maybe you have a lot of, esteem for them, and you say hi, you greet them, and they're on their phone, doing this, or they're preoccupied with something else, and maybe they don't even make eye contact or greet you. What's the normal response that we take on? Jerk face, rah, 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 rah. But again, maybe we don't know, like Jenn said, what part of the elephant are they, and what are they touching right there, So we just need to probably be a little more understanding, a little more open.
Or at least not become too dysregulated by it.
That's right. So the problem is that we stop contributing. When we get that way, we get dysregulated, we stop contributing to our culture of kindness, and we contribute to other cultures that we really don't want in the workplace. And so we complain about our culture, we complain about our work environment. We realize it's not a gentle, kind, and warm place, and so we emphasize those things, and we celebrate those things, and that consumes us. And we talk about them. We talk them all the time. And like sometimes, honestly, I don't have a book face, but I know some people put that stuff on Facebook. And like, oh, why don't you do that? We tend to look, or sometimes some folks, I'll say, tend to look for the weaknesses or the issues or the concerns or the problems. And then that's what we name. That's what we celebrate and talk about all the time.
And then that becomes the whole truth.
Yeah, then that becomes our elephant.
Yeah.
Big negative elephant. Then what often can happen is we align, or we match up, we pair up with people who have similar issues with the elephant. And so we all go to the pita place on a day, or we all go to lunch on this particular day, or we all go to this brewery after work, and we drink a brewski and complain and name our issues. And we just sit there and stew and stir the pot and get everybody all worked up. Yeah, I'm looking for work. I want a new job. And our culture is where? Our culture is like in the elephant toilet. And here's the problem, is the third point there. We're operating out of our vulnerabilities. Our vulnerabilities are those, I don't know if I should say deficits, but they're those areas of need in our life that maybe we're not good at, such as like, I'm not a good techie dude. This is a real vulnerability for me because I don't know nothing. I think I'm doing good if I get my text messages, my voicemails. That's all I need. That's all I got. So don't ask me any questions about this. This is a vulnerability for me. I just have no knowledge about that kind of thing. And what we do is normally we try to hide our vulnerabilities. We don't want people to know them. I don't want you to know what I'm not good at because I'm embarrassed about that thing. So I try to hide it. I try to look cool and smooth, right? That's not what we are. That's not what I am. Here. And the issue is when we get dysregulated emotionally because we've touched one part of the elephant and we're aligning with people who got a lot of vulnerabilities and brokenness of their own, we're actually naming and celebrating our vulnerabilities. We're actually putting it out there for people to see. That's when we say things we wouldn't normally say, or we act like we wouldn't normally act, or we're short-tempered and we're frustrated, and we make it known to everybody around us in the cubicles who's mad at some little issue.
So culture care is really about our discipline and what we do to contribute. And when we're operating from a place that's vulnerable, we oftentimes think it's our agency's responsibility to make me feel appreciated. And it's my agency's responsibility to be a good workplace. And then I forget that I've got responsibility to contribute. And what have I been doing to help the culture, or what have I been doing to hurt the culture? So it is a really slippery slope when we start operating out of our vulnerabilities. And really, a vulnerable person means their demands are high. So that Jurassic Park dinosaur has started to sneak in. That's not who they are. If they had a better balance, if they weren't so over demanded, they would look a lot different. And so we need to pay attention to that and recognize that for what it is. That person's not a dinosaur from Jurassic Park. They really aren't. If they were treated a little differently, which is my job to do, that might start changing for them. But they also have to take that responsibility to do the same thing. If everybody does what we're supposed to do, culture will be great. We can't wait for other people to make it easier for us. We have to go first, and we have to be those little blazing pioneers that are like, this is a good culture. There are things that aren't perfect about it, but vulnerabilities are starting places for more gifts. So if I do have vulnerabilities, those are things that I can work on to make the culture better at my agency.
I think it's good to remember that even though I have these vulnerabilities or these things that I could grow in, there are opportunities for me to improve. There are opportunities for me to learn. There are opportunities for me to reach out and grab onto a new skill or a new idea or just dive in.
So emotion regulation is our next topic, and this is one of my most favorite topics, because if you cannot regulate your emotions, you will think culture care is the most ridiculous thing in the entire world. And I have finally figured out why we get hecklers at working with people trainings is because they don't have good emotion regulation skills. So the demands get really high. You've got a really stressful situation. Somebody is clearly at their worst. And now I'm asking you to go in there and be at your best. But if you can't regulate your emotions, if you can't regulate the way that you respond to a stressful situation, you're going to think I'm out of my mind to ask you to be patient with that person, to be kind with that person, to nurture. This is a nurture moment, not a teaching moment. You're just going to be like, what, Jen? You were just like, what? Well, it goes back to the maturity level that you have for your emotions. Do your emotions run you? Do your emotions decide how you act without you having a lot of input about that? Is the amygdala guiding you and making you fight or flight situations? Or do you keep your prefrontal cortex intact so that you can make really good decisions? So that's what emotion regulation is all about. And if you want a great work culture, people need to be really committed to disciplining their emotional responses. So when you do dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a great treatment method for individuals that have borderline personality disorder, I did skills groups for many years, and I probably benefited way more than anybody that took the class. I don't know why we just make it for people with borderline personality disorder. It should be like an agency-wide training that everyone needs to take is how to regulate, how to do distress tolerance, how to have interpersonal effectiveness. Why we don't teach this to employees is really just baffling to me. But anyways, I got to benefit from it because I was teaching it. So we teach the dashboard on a car gives us so much information about the health of our car. We've got a gas light. We've got a speedometer that will tell us if we're going too fast or going too slow. We've got a little thing that'll tell us if we're getting hot or cold. How nice is that? We've got this thing that will tell us about how hard the engine.
Tachometer.
Yeah, we get this thing that'll tell us about how hard the engine is working, if it's working too hard. Then there's these amazing lights that just will pop up where it's like, whoa, take action, right? Your oil light comes on, your engine light comes on. You're not going to want to get in a car in Muskegon and drive to Ann Arbor if my engine light is on. These are important things that we pay attention to because we wouldn't want to put ourselves in a vulnerable spot in a car. But for some reason, we just can fly off the handle in a moment's notice when it deals with our own personal emotions. We might be really stressed and overwhelmed, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to take care of this right now. Whoa, you're not in a good place to go take care of that right now. It's the same thing as like driving to Ann Arbor when your oil light is on or your check engine light is on. We need to work on regulating our own responses so that we can be more effective. So we do have a dashboard. It works just like your car's dashboard, only it's physical cues that your body's going to give off that you are stressed. Something has just happened in your environment and it's engaged your emotions. And it could be very different for all of you, but I'm sure you can identify what happens to you physically when you start to get dysregulated, whether that's worry, whether that's anxiety, whether that's anger. People can get really blotchy. They can flush right out. Not that I love that, but it does give me some really good cues to know when someone's like flushing out that, oh man, we might have some amygdala things going on right here, right? We sometimes will say it's starting to smell like almonds. When we can smell almonds because the amygdala looks like an almond, we know that there's probably going to be some regulation that's needed. And I got to switch gears, and we can't do the plan that we had because another one has just arrived. So my heart will start beating faster if I'm feeling challenged or if I'm feeling emotional. In fact, in some cases, I've actually felt like I've heard my heart. It's like, boom, 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 boom. You know, those are really intense emotions. People's muscles can get tight. Their shoulders can start to rise. When I start to notice those things about myself, I know I need to slow down. Just like a good car owner, I know I'm not going to go on a long car trip right now because I'm getting cues that I'm getting dysregulated. So emotions organize us and they prepare us for action. So you can probably decide what happens if our emotional responses are out of control and undisciplined, what our behaviors would look like at work, and what that would do to our work culture. If my emotions are disciplined or regulated, my behaviors are going to look a lot different, and I'm probably going to be a really powerful piece of the culture at work rather than something that's taking away from that culture. So we give this assignment in our working with people on the first day, and it's called Mission Possible. And so we've taught a lot about what vulnerabilities are. When our demands are high, there's going to be this urge to like be impatient. There's going to be this situation where we might want to take control and not let somebody else do something. You know, like we just get vulnerable when our demands are high. So we ask people to wait for that window of opportunity to find you that night, because it will. When we go home, something always happens that can make us feel vulnerable. And what we want people to try and do is give a gift instead. So instead of being impatient with that child or with that spouse, I want you to try some patience. And what does patience look like? Or whatever vulnerability you pick, or I'm just trying to give you an example. You're just trying to give a gift instead of what a typical vulnerability would be. And because we're starting small, I'm like, you only have to do it once. You don't have to do it all night. You can just go back to the way you usually are. You're just going to try it once to give a gift. And what is so interesting to me is that people perceive this assignment as, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to really contribute to the culture so much. I'm typically going to just flee. I'm going to flight. So sometimes parents will be like, all right, I was ready. That window of opportunity happened like you said it would. My daughter brought all these flashcards out and she wanted to play with them, but she plays with flashcards differently than I do. And she just threw them all over the kitchen floor. Well, that made mom really mad. She's worked all day, her demands are high, and now there's this big mess in the kitchen. So her idea of giving a gift was to go in her room and slam the door. And I didn't yell at my kid. And I'm just like, oh, trying to like find the silver lining of like, you know, that was a harm reduction. That was like, okay. So I don't always know how to handle those situations when they come up, but they just teach me that people aren't really understanding what gift giving means. Gift giving doesn't mean we ignore what's happened in the environment. Gift giving would be, let's pick these up. This isn't how we play with flashcards, or maybe we're playing with flashcards differently today, because right, not everything's about a task, or, you know, sometimes it's about relationship and the nurture and what kind of eye contact could I have gotten, or what kind of touch could I have had during that time of flashcards all over the kitchen. You know, we miss these windows of opportunity because we can't regulate ourselves, and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to make sure that we're disciplined enough emotionally so that we can take the time to nurture and teach in those moments that come to us. So we're so lucky that our actions don't have to be all or none. We don't have to fly off the handle, and we don't have to ignore. When something happens in our environment that stimulates an emotional response, we have this thing called an accountable conversation. So we're going to be spending some time, the rest of our time, talking about accountability and what that looks like as we contribute to the culture at work. Because so often at work, we might fly off the handle because someone has upset us, or we might just completely ignore it because we're not sure how to proceed. And neither one of those options is helpful to our culture. So we have to be committed to having more accountable conversations. And just listening to Dr. Wilkins this morning, and oh my word, the accountability that he put on the culture of folks being served with developmental disabilities was just amazing. Like, he just opened doors that are fantastic. If he hadn't had those accountable conversations, if he hadn't had those accountable actions he did, just think what the culture could still be like for folks in institutions.
Can I jump in here and just say a story here?
Yeah.
Just as a practical story from my own personal life. My parents are transitioning out of a big house with a great big yard to what I was hoping would be a smaller house, but turned out to be a bigger house. But there is a smaller yard. So they went from about 3.5 acres to less of a yard. And so little, baby steps. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I've been mowing their yards. So every night when I get home from work, I got to go mow the 3 acres because they can't let it go to woods. Got to be mowed. All right. So I've been mowing their yards. And then I was at the new house mowing the yard. And so my brother comes over and he's drinking iced tea. And my sister was out on the patio and she was drinking iced tea. And the Rents, that's the parents, the Rents, they were on their patio and they were drinking iced tea. Well, what's everybody doing is drinking iced tea. But what's Doug doing? Sweating and hot and mowing the yard. And so my almond was getting roasted a little bit. And as I'm mowing the yard, I'm like, Bunna, why can't somebody else be helping me out with this? And Doug's personality is, and there may be some of you that are kind of like this, I'm just kind of a fixer, just a doer. Like if I say this phrase, can you finish it? So if I forgot the phrase, that's gonna
Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah. If you want something done right, that's right, yeah. So that's what I say. I just say, you want the yard mowed right, just gotta do it myself. But then I don't give other people chances to get out of their vulnerabilities and stretch them because I'm not willing to be accountable. It's easy just to fall into that. And so after I was done, I made a point to draw attention to that and say, I love doing this. I enjoy participating in this. I'm looking for some help that maybe we could schedule. And so we worked out this schedule where some of the other siblings were going to try to help. Now, in my mind, as I'm going home that night, I'm like, what they're going to do is they're going to skip their week and it'll just be longer on my week. Because my amygdala is still a little roasted, at that point. But it's easy to just slide into not having those conversations, not having accountability. I'll just sit there and let them drink their iced tea. Doug will fix it and take care of it, and it'll be done good, and everything will be fine. But then nobody learns, nobody grows. And then who's frustrated? Me. So I do all the work, and I'm angry about it. Those aren't good.
So we have to be able to find the balance. We don't want to fly off the handle, but we also don't want to ignore. We want to be able to address in a regulated fashion the things that happen at work that aren't helping the culture. So I have to evaluate my own emotional responses before I take action. If you can slow your emotions down long enough to have a little dialogue with yourself about why am I upset? Do I have some histories and memories in here that have kind of sparked this to make this more? Or is this really a big deal? I'm not sure. I've got to have this dialogue with myself. Another thing I need to think about is what are my next steps going to be? If you could just think about that for a few minutes, I guarantee your next steps will be way more skillful than if you just impulsively went for some sort of action without really thinking about the after effects. And then one question that we feel really is important is, who do I seek out when I'm upset at work? The answer to this question will really tell you where you fall in the continuum of contributing to culture care. Do you seek out the person who's going to align with you and gossip with you about how terrible that situation was? Or do you seek out the mentor who's going to help you repair, who's going to help you problem solve to make it a better culture? And sometimes, guess what? I kind of drift over to the person who wants to gossip and wants to be like, can you believe that? Oh my gosh, that does nothing for the culture. And I need to be more accountable with myself and with my emotions so that I'm making a difference where I work. Because if I want the place where I work to be a better place, I need to seek out the mentor when I'm having dysregulated emotions. And that's just a commitment we need to make, and it's an easy step. So we're all a bunch of fishes sitting in a little fishbowl, the way we're used to doing stuff. It's comfortable, it's safe. Yeah, we might get frustrated because we're the only one mowing the yard, but it's predictable. I know how that works. But I'm telling you, we need to jump out of this fishbowl because look, there's just this way bigger world out there with way more opportunities. And when your culture at work is way more fantastic, those demands aren't quite as intense. And you will start to shift the way you feel about your job when you take those risks to have accountable conversations rather than seeking out the person to gossip with. And I just couldn't help but think about Dr. Wilkins again. I'm like, yeah. I said to Doug while he was talking, oh my gosh, he's a fishbowl jumper. He does not just stay in his fishbowl. All right, so 3 good questions for you before you take action with your strong emotions. What is my objective? What is it that I want to be different? How do I want that person to feel about me after that interaction, after that accountable situation? And how do I want to feel about myself? Respect. Those questions will help drive some really nice culture and just our central purpose of our presence. We're supposed to nurture, teach, and sustain these experiences of connectedness and companionship and community. And we can't do that if we're flying off the handle. And what we usually will do, or at least what I will usually do, is when I answer that relationship goal, how do I want the person to feel about me afterwards? I want them to feel like, oh, my colleague just brought something up to me and I want them to think about it. But my fear is they're just going to be mad at me. And if I think that might be the answer, I just stay in my fishbowl. And so what I'm challenging you to do today is to take some risks and to jump out of that fishbowl. Because if you're approaching that coworker or that colleague with respect and dignity and a sense of regulation, it's okay if they get upset by that because you're doing something to impact a much greater good and you're jumping out of your little fishbowl. So here's some tips and tricks that you can use at work. We tiered this. It's a level system. So however you're wanting to challenge yourself, there's going to be a place for you with these options. So if you're wanting to go the more easy route, which is perfectly fine, right? We all got to start somewhere. We can do this. Have some nicknames for people at work. We have a person at work who she's going back to school, and so Thursdays we call her the professor. Professor, can you handle this today? Can you do this today? She loves being called the professor, right? I'm Agent Haak, actually, because I love doing detective work. I love trying to figure out the why behind what somebody's doing. And so my teammates call me Agent Haak. They'll even say it in emails. Finance is even calling me Agent Haak now. It's just so much fun. We need to use more emojis when we're texting. That is such a universal language, and it's way safer when you're driving. I'm kidding. Don't text when you're driving. That is so dangerous. Don't do that. But it's so much quicker to use emojis because it just communicates so quickly how you're feeling. And that is such an important component to social connectedness. We've got some really fantastic catchphrases on our team. We probably stole it from D and Ed, but we talk about the spaghetti hitting the fan quite a bit. When you work on an intensive team, there is a lot of crisis that isn't scheduled in our day. So we eat a lot of spaghetti at our team. And sometimes we're so full of spaghetti and we're like, if I have one more spaghetti meal, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, that communicates right away that contact was rough and this person's going to need a little debriefing to figure out what happened or what our next steps are. And it's fun to talk about spaghetti rather than to talk about all of the hard stuff. Another one we do is, oh boy. We do this for most emails. If we get a big email about how something's got to change or a new procedure, oh boy. If you could just try this at work, you will find it is a very satisfying response when you get a bad email or you see that caller ID of that guardian that's really tough to talk to. Before you answer it, just go, oh boy. Hello, this is Jenn Haak from Healthwest. It is amazing what it does to your emotions. It just settles them a little bit. And it actually was a client that taught me that. She just says, oh boy, about everything. And so I started saying it too. And I'm like, thank you so much for giving me that little tiny skill because my mom's doing it now. My kids are doing it now. So instead of flying off the handle, we're all like, oh boy. The next thing we do is we use emails on our team to say thank you and to celebrate even the smallest victory. Because For us, probably for you too, emails are one of the biggest like demand centers of our life. Usually an email is requiring something from us. And if we can use those emails to say thank you, if the front desk is like, hey, this person's here, and somebody on the team is like, I got it, I'll head up. Thank you so much. You've just really helped out, right? People need to be thanked more, and do it in email because it's sustainable. They can see it. It lasts forever. It's always there. All right, if you're looking for a little bit more of a challenge, here we go.
So, backing up for just a second.
Okay, it's 11.
You're
back
fine.
up
You
too
stay
far.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
you stay right there. I have 2 nicknames.
Oh, he does.
Yeah. Some people call me Dougie Fresh, and some people call me Cheaper by the Dozen.
Oh, you have 3 nicknames.
Oh, do I got another one?
Yeah. They also
not
call
that
him
one.
They call him the Silver Fox.
That was.
He hates that nickname.
Yeah. That was because when I was a team leader for a while, I had a big silver van. And so we drove the silver van.
No, that really wasn't why at all. But let's keep going.
Okay, going to this slide right here. Level 2 is moderate skills. And there's really 2 of them. There's being praised and doing praise. Being praised is praising people for who they are, personality traits, character traits, reasons why I enjoy you. I want to go to lunch with you. I like to work with you. I wonder if I could move my cubicle and share space next to you. I want to be in the same row. Why is that? Because you inspire me. I like working with you. Your smile is contagious. I feel calmer around you. That's a good one for you, because I'm not a very calm person, actually, unless I drink a lot of coffee. Then there's doing praise. Doing praise is a little bit more performance-oriented. What's the common doing praise we hear? Good job, 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 good job. And so our good job becomes what? Mundane, meaningless, doesn't have a lot of value to it. On a 1 to 10 scale, it's like a 0.5. So it's entry level. It's better than going down the hall like this. But it's just the super basic. We can do way better with just a little bit of thought. So we want to learn to just be able to pull a couple of things we notice, a couple characteristics about the performance. So instead of saying 8 good jobs, maybe I say things like, thank you for returning those calls and responding to that crisis. I really appreciate that. Or amazing job supporting that person in crisis. Way to go. Woo, 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 woo. I'm just adding a little more to it than just my good job.
You don't have to do this part, though.
No, that's more my style.
Okay.
You can have woo, woo down here.
Another cool thing about doing praise is that you can reteach something too during the praise. Because if I say thank you for returning those phone calls, I've just taught you about how great it is to return phone calls. And if I'm teaching through praise, you're way more likely to palate that one, man. That tastes way more like Sunday at McDonald's with some nuts in it. I don't know what they put on those things. I don't get those very much anymore. Anyway, it just tastes better when I'm learning through praise than if I'm learning through something I've made a mistake on. So just know the grass gets greener where you water it. You want your coworkers to be nicer people and to pull more weight. Praise them when they're doing nicer things and pulling more weight, because you're going to see more of that.
You remember this morning in our keynote address, what did he say about his mom? She caught me being good. She worked hard to catch me being good. My mom did that too, because I had a lot of fire setting and stuff.
Fire setting?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Okay, so accountable conversations are all about our communication style and why we need to do that. What is an accountable conversation? It's our obligation to have a responsible conversation with somebody else when we feel like the culture is needing a little tweak. All right? We can't avoid these situations anymore. If we want to improve the culture in our workplace, let's get out of that fishbowl and let's take a chance. Because if we don't, Human nature can kind of rest and be all right with mediocrity. If we don't challenge ourselves, if we don't work to be accountable to each other, we're kind of cool just like being average. And it is way more fun to not be average. It's way more fun to be fantastic. So we don't want a bunch of unconscious incompetence at work. So I'm about to endure some pretty big tongue twisters, and I hope I can do this and give it some justice. So here's 4 different categories, and I want you to think about where you might fall or where some of your coworkers might fall in these different categories. We've got an unconscious incompetent. This is a person who has absolutely no idea what they're doing to the culture at work. They simply do not know. And they're doing things that harm the culture, and they just don't get it. The next one is there's a conscious incompetent. So someone has pointed it out to them. Someone has had an accountable conversation with them, but they still haven't done anything to change. They just know that what they're doing might bother somebody. All right. The next stage is the consciously competent person. So now they're aware and they're trying to become more skillful. They're trying to develop those vulnerabilities they had and shape them into more gifts. This is a great place for our agencies to be in. We want people to be consciously competent and trying to work really hard to build a better work environment, because our work environments are so demanding. We need this positive interaction. We need this positive culture. The last stage, which is like where you've arrived, is when you're unconsciously competent, where I can just kind of go through my day. I don't have to think too hard about it. I'm pretty good at just having these conversations that are natural and that are easy, but they're doing some fantastic things for the culture. So when I think about this continuum, I think about what does somebody look like on a skateboard the first time they try? They're unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know before they step on that skateboard, and they're about to get a big surprise, right? They're probably going to fall. If I were to get on a skateboard, in fact, my kids have these hoverboard things, and I got on one, and I'm never, ever going to do it again. So if this was workplace culture, our culture would be doomed, because I failed and I'm not trying again. I blasted myself into the wall backwards. They make it look so easy. They start unconsciously competent on those things. They didn't even have a learning curve. I was so jealous, because I used to be athletic. This is going to be easy for me. I can do this. And I get on there with a little bit of confidence, and before you know it, I'm like, do I need 911? Okay. So as we start to move through these levels, we have to not get disappointed. We have to be able to get back up after we've fallen, because if we don't have enough determination, we're never going to get out of the first 2 stages. I think about Cora, my little 9-month-old baby, and she is like scooting around couches and chairs, and she's trying to walk so hard. This girl falls all the time. She doesn't even cry. She doesn't even have an emotional response to it. She is so determined to become unconsciously competent that she is just working her tail off to learn to walk. That's the kind of determination we need in our agencies to be a better place for our coworkers. Because when we have a stronger place for coworkers, it just takes care of itself for the kind of services we deliver. All right, we got like probably less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just factor that in, Striker.
All right.
Okay.
So, I want to tell you a little story about a corporation, and there was a consultant hired for this corporation. And the reason that he was brought in, because morale was low, everybody's amygdala was a little toasty smelling, and things just weren't in a good place. It wasn't not a good atmosphere. And the deal was that there were a lot of people who were kind of numbers people, budget people, engineer kind of staff, employers or employees, and they didn't need tons of affirmations in their life. So they didn't need tons of people smiling at them and hugging them and shaking hands and kissing babies and those kinds of things. They just didn't need those things in their life to do my numbers, to make my lines match up, to get numbers on one side and variables or letters on the other side. For those of you social workers that remember algebra, I remember because I took it twice. Anyway, so they hire this consultant, and he comes in after some of these folks were promoted. So they've worked their way up. They've climbed the ladder. Some are supervisors. Some are vice presidents. And they don't understand why is it that morale is low? Why is it that people leave and there's this turnover and people are upset? And it's because they didn't, as they didn't need that affirmation, now they grow into the supervisor roles and they're still not needing the affirmation. And so they're not giving the affirmation. But some of the people that replaced them were people who do need those things. We do need to be smiled at. We do need people to make eye contact and shake our hand and give us an attaboy on the back with a pat on the elbow. We need those things in life. It creates that culture of kindness that we long for and we want to be a part of and is actually fun. And so the consultant, goes through these evaluations and assessments and spends time in this department and that department. And in his exit interviewing, he says, I want you to smile more. And they're like, what? I want you to smile more. And so the upper echelons of the corporation had to diligently work harder just to put a smile on their face. To work hard, to smile at people, just to begin to take steps to create an environment where there's warmth and there's acceptance and there's kindness here. Why? Because we want people coming back. We don't want all this turnover. It takes a lot of money and a lot of time to train new people all the time.
The feedback from people whose bosses don't smile at them was that I've done something wrong. We start to get paranoid when somebody doesn't smile at us. Another thing that we do is we think that there's trouble, like what's coming next. And so when these bosses were just smiling, it improved productivity. I mean, I don't know how they tracked that, but it just felt like morale was better. And I guess you can say if morale is better, productivity is going to be better too. And it was just the simple assignment of smiling at your staff and looking them in the eyes. So those supervisors went from a place of unconscious incompetence to, I don't know how unconsciously competent they were, because I don't know how much buy-in they had with smiling, because they were like, why do you want me to smile? But they did. They smiled and it helped. So we have some reasons why we don't like to have accountable conversations, because it can maybe foster some conflict. And when you think of conflict, you probably think of negative things. You think of people flying off the handle. You think of relationships getting broken, people not being able to work together. And maybe that's going to predict future dysregulation if I have conflict now. Research shows that's not true. If you're having healthy, accountable conflict. If we're having dysregulated conflict, absolutely, it's going to hurt the culture. But when we can have conversations that are accountable, that show that I'm regulated, that you're going to be regulated, we're going to have a conversation about something, it does marvelous things for people and their work environment. So don't be dismayed by those misconceptions that conflict is going to make the culture worse. It's actually going to make it better. It kind of busts things through. We get plugged up and it kind of busts things through, and then things flow better. So just in leaving you today, we want you to care enough about your culture in your workplace that you're going to jump out of your fishbowl and you're going to try some things that might make you feel a little out of water. But what you're really doing is you're going into much bigger water where there's way better opportunities, and it's going to be fantastic. So ride out those things that don't go perfectly, because to make that jump from an unconsciously incompetent person to a consciously competent person, it's going to take some bumps and bruises and some rough interactions. The more you do that, the less it's going to be rough and the better it's going to be. So care about your cultures and step out of your boxes and get uncomfortable, because that's where the magic happens. All right, I think we're at an hour, so let's call it a good deal. Thanks for coming.